Welcome, gentle listeners. I sincerely hope you have noticed the longer tales and increased passion that has been afforded of late. But if not, I can assure you it has made the world of difference, my end, to have a sponsor. With the very generous patrons, they have kept the lights on and allowed me to think more on our narratives and less on bills. Now, before the main event, we are going to give just 1 minute of our time to our sponsors. It is literally 1 minute and 4 seconds. So let's have at it. Raid Shadow Legends, where you too can become a legend. The mobile game taking the world by storm, and the development keeps coming, the vista of thrills only intensifying. New players now have a 270-day calendar of rewards for the simple act of logging in daily. Raid have added a bazaar for the acquisition of high-end loot gained from your efforts in the new tag team arenas. Plus you can gain champion fragments to purchase mighty champions. There is so much more to tell, but I'll leave you to discover this for yourself. Go to the video description, click on the special links, and if you are a new player, you will gain 50,000 silver, 50 gems, 1 energy refill, 1 clan boss, and 5 mystery shards, 1 day of XP boost, and 1 free epic champion, Shaman, a vivacious yet violent She-Hulk who is unmatched for the early levels. But you can't wait about or you might miss out on this amazing offer. Raid Shadow Legends. Begin your legend today. For generations unnumbered, my family have been counted amongst the wise, had given counsel and performed the rites of our community. It was always our honor, but now it has become our curse. For tonight, I perform the most hated task I have ever been asked to perform. Usually a joy, a ceremony, a rite of acceptance, but not tonight. I walk, to be more precise, I trudge, with one of the most precious cargoes in my charge, snuggled into the crook of my arm, I trudge. It is a long journey tonight, a pathway that seems to be never-ending, but in truth, I do not wish to get to its conclusion. I do not want it to stop, for there can be but one result tonight. I know it. They knew it. The entire hamlet knew it. We dreaded this day, all of us. For Smumara and Saja were such wonderful people, so brilliant, so bright, so cheery, so beautiful. Not just of form, but of substance as well. None could argue that Smumara had been the belle of every barn dance and every gathering. She had been like a ray of sunshine given form, her hair a dazzling gold, her limbs clean and possessing a grace none could explain. She was like a summer's day, a dazzling dawn. Saja, he had always been everyone's son, always the centre of attention, for he knew no fear, yet understood it in others. He did not chide or deride it in others either, or aggrandize himself through his lack of it. Not Saja. He would guide, he would coo, he would smile and he would make light of the darkness, would laugh at the danger, and by doing so become a beacon, a flame which consumed the fear in others. It was the light in his own way. When they began to court and fell in love, it was the joy of the village. Like a poem or play brought to life, they would cheer all who saw them in their clear doting on each other. Their wedding day was the most happy in living memory. Many of the boys and even men had secretly hoped in their heart of hearts that Smumara would choose them, would see their worth, would fall in love with them. Yet for some reason none begrudged Saja of his win, his victory, his taking her hand and taking her heart. For she beamed so. In everything she did, everywhere she went, everyone she spoke to, Smumara was happy. And with it our entire gathering. We all seemed to reflect that light. We were all happier. But then it happened. The pregnancy was hard on Smumara. Her back ached and her ankles swelled. She had pangs and was regularly violently sick. But we all gathered around and helped. That was not what went wrong. For all knew she carried a boy child. Pain and pangs meant power and favour to the child. It was a sign from the Emperor. Saja's own mother had suffered as much, but she had passed in the birthing. All now feared it for Smumara. The day came and went, and we all breathed a deep sigh of relief when Smumara was declared well. Tired, but well. She had given birth to a boy child, as we all had known would happen. But she had survived. And the feast the following day was one of deep elation, warmth and community. For Saja was of such cheer it was infectious. With that, and the relief that Smumara was well, the birthing celebration became raucous. But signs started. It was only a week ago now, but it has been such a long week. I have not slept since that first day. The day that a storm approached from the west, dark and terrible and threatening, yet it dissipated not a few miles from our village. It simply blew itself out. And deep down, I knew. We all did as we watched it happen. Nor did the child cry. Not once. Its wide, beautiful, glistening eyes showed a gleaming and brilliant soul within, often smiling despite his age. His eyes should not be opening yet, not as wide as they are, not as hungrily to take in the world. More signs. When outside the wind would pick up, but never in gusts, always playfully, fluttering banners, skirts and old men's comb-overs. The world just came into life when he viewed it. And we knew. And the remaining nights I have not been able to sleep. I know what will happen. I know what I will have to do. I know this will break my heart. The hearts of Saja and Smumara. The hearts of all in the village. Our little community. Once it would have been the greatest joy and honour to witness these signs. Would have been a miracle to celebrate, for a child of the clouds to be born amongst us. But that was before Akanin Stormstrider. He changed everything. Supposedly a powerful foretelling had been woven about his coming. It was meant to be the fulfillment of a promise, the beginning of a golden age. But instead, he brought horror and tyranny to our world. Destroyed much of our culture, much of our world. His ravening followers pulled down monuments and glories to any but he. All who resisted were massacred. Alone, he was said to be the match of 100 men. He twisted the promise of life-giving rain to the destruction of the storm, whirling around our globe like a typhoon of annihilation, never ending. He would not die. Even when hundreds of years passed, he would not die. Many valiant souls rose against him, but were brutally put down again and again. Finally, when the Star Warriors, the Angels of Death, arrived, they stood with us against the tyrant. They were victorious, but in that final battle, where the Stormstrider was finally bested, even with the help of the men of the Imperium, even then, it is said that half of the men of our world were slain fighting for or against him. We have never truly recovered. When travelling, I have many times passed the remains of old villages denuded of life even still, graveyards marking those years of pain and loss. The days of hate were over, but they could never be forgotten, and they could never be permitted to come again. And the Imperium had shown us how our society could alter, could adapt. And in that time the role of my line changed. Once the greatest glory of one of the wise was to find a child of the clouds, to teach it, to guide it and protect it. But no more. My musings, my mental defense, my avoidance of the pathway of what must happen right now, are over. My feet have taken me to the place of reckoning. A land of plains, here is the lake. In our world that is mostly flat and featureless, here is the highest point. I find myself standing on an outcrop of rock, some 100 feet up, looking down at the one life-giving and taking place we all know. For it is the lake that feeds the fields around us, bringing crops to our tables. But inside it are dangerous things, swift things, hungry things. None can go into the water and live. None. I take the child from my one arm, nestled in the crook as he is. The shawl he is wrapped in jingles from the heavy metal trinkets at its edge. So many trinkets given by all. For luck, they say to themselves. But it is not really. I can imagine his wide eyes looking up at me in curiosity and wonder. For he has not even cried now, not even when separated from his mother and father and walked away by a stranger. I try not to look at the boy child as I begin the ritual. Impossible as that may seem, as cowardly as that may sound. But it is the truth. I hate this day. And so I lift him up and unwrap him. I then throw the shawl over my shoulder and lift him up naked in both of my outstretched hands. He is light. Too light. It begins. The tears. I can now barely focus as I take one of my hands away from supporting him. I cannot help but be racked with a sob as I then slowly remove the other hand. And he does not fall. I so wanted him to be heavy in my hands, to be unable to take my hands from him. But I can, and he does not fall. He sits there as if held by a spectral cradle, the winds holding him aloft, whipping around his head and body, but gently. He smiles at me as I look at him. His eyes are shining. I should not have done that. It breaks something inside me. I should not have looked in his eyes. It is then, my hands shaking so, that I take up the ceremonial shawl, and I throw it over him. There's a deep intake of breath from him, but still no tears, as he is covered by the shawl. And then the trinkets at its edges come into play. They drag him down, slowly and steadily. He is so strong that I will bless every soul who gave a trinket to Smumara and Sarja, for it is a mercy. He is dragged down and down and down by them, until he is finally pushed under the water, and it ends. I take the staff I had feared I would have to use to stun him, and I use it more than I ever have, as I lean on it like a man broken. For I now have to return to the village, have to inform Smumara and Sarja, have to then watch as they either die inside, or worse, they try again and again for a child not of the clouds, as if anything other could come from their joining. But no matter the pain, no matter how it may blight our village, our community, no matter that it may rob us of the sunshine that was their love, their example, we can never, ever forget the past. Never, ever forget the cost of even one child of the clouds from reaching their power. For we can never, ever have another Stormstrider again. We can never again be ruled by such. As the Imperium all too rightly states in its first book of indoctrination, to be unclean that is the mark of the mutant. To be impure, that is the mark of the mutant. To be abhorred, that is the mark of the mutant. To be reviled, that is the mark of the mutant. To be hunted, that is the mark of the mutant. To be purged, that is the fate of the mutant. To be cleansed, for that is the fate of all mutants. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and features of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future. Today, we are going to explore a subgroup of the setting that is often mentioned, but rarely discussed. This is not just in the setting itself, but for some reason there is never really much stated about them in most media. How do you know them? Well, from any mention of the Ecclesiarchy, the Black Templars, Inquisitors and Inquisition, or the Sisters of Battle especially. One of the most often heard clarion calls of these orders is along the lines of "Death to the traitor, the witch, the heretic." But also, often the first on the list, is the mutant. But what is a mutant? Why do they occur? And why are they so feared and denigrated by the Imperium of mankind and many other factions and races in the grim darkness of the far future? And so, we begin our journey with the first question. What is a mutant? A mutant is any being that has deviated from the baseline genome and its accepted expressions and variations within the racial archetypes. Usually, these are unique individually expressed mutations and not stable or repeated in the line. Simply put, a mutant will have no idea how their offspring will look, feel, or act. None. No prior genetic oddities or abilities are guaranteed to be recurrent or passed on, as they are mutating from the baseline human and not from the template set by the attributes or mutations of their parental units. For the Imperium, some of the import is in the nature of the difference and how it is passed on in the genetic line. Thus abhumans, although not well treated, are viewed as substantially different to mutants by many wings of the administratum, if not all. If it is a stable variant of a changed human baseline that is usually the effect of habitat, then the race will be deemed abhumans. For more details, please see my entries on abhumans, ogrins, ratlings, and squats. This is where the environment or other factors have slowly or swiftly, but universally, created a change in the characteristics of the humans on that planet. Good examples are the high-gravity worlds that created the Ogrin substrate, and the gravity-light worlds that made the Longshanks. But when a child is born to these substrains, then they are Ogrins or Longshanks. They are not a random roll of fate each time, which is the inevitable fate of any and all mutant couplings or procreation. Every single time, it is a roll of the dice, a dance with fate to see what random and potentially dramatic results will be generated. In a mutant settlement, every child truly is unique, in form as well as in their soul. And it is this random element, this variety, that is so terrifying to the Imperium of Man, along with many Xenos cultures and races. For in a universe that contains the threat of the corrupting powers of chaos, any deviation from the norm is to be feared, but certainly not illogically or without a wealth of experience to ground it. We shall expound upon this theme more as we progress. How do mutants come about? Why is there simply so much mutation in the far future? Here we find a plethora of reasons, a veritable collage of circumstances of which I shall only touch on some now as an example. One must remember that humanity, along with many of the races that are extant in the setting, are phenomenally old, as we would view such matters. The Imperium itself has stood for over 10,000 years now, a staggering amount of time, but humanity itself has been amongst the stars of the galaxy for a lot longer. Once there was a time of enlightened science and expansionism, where humanity worked for the common good of all, and education and progress were lauded as much as they are now outright persecuted. In this period, which was previously seen as a golden age of technology, but is now called the Dark Age of technology, humanity swept out into the galaxy and settled around warp jump points and clusters, but did so on a dazzling variety of worlds and environments. So environmental factors have altered many a populace, either through direct alteration of the genes via diet, exposure to background radiations, and other quantifiable factors that would either alter mating priorities due to attributes that would lend to survival, through to cultures extolling the virtues of certain facets of humanity over others that are very different to the norm. But these usually lead to abhumans, stable development of altered humans. But sometimes, the background radiation or other factors could lead to a change in the human line and make their genes throw out random mutations. The Age of Technology then led to a catastrophe called Old Night, or the Age of Strife, an event to be described in more detail in a future run of entries I have planned, but the basics shall be outlined. An artificial intelligence rebellion stripped humanity of its faith in technology, also making intellectualism a derided pursuit. To put down the rebellion almost finished humanity, and even at their height as they were, it took the coordination with other races and factions to finally put down the AI revolt. It shattered humanity's faith in itself, and things only got worse. So much worse. In this period, the mighty human federation of planets was severed from each other, warp travel being all but impossible. Basically, all worlds were cut off from each other, and threats that were previously easily dealt with were suddenly existential to humanity as a whole. Many planets had interconnected trade, support, and supply built into their very existence, so many of these cultures that relied on incoming food or other resources simply died. Others devolved into anarchy, and then regressed into barbaric hellholes. Warfare was inevitable and widespread, as scarcity destroyed the halcyon existence of the Age of Technology. With such advanced scientific weapons of utter brutality were created that very often changed the peoples of a world irrevocably. Nuclear exchanges, chemical and biological weapons were unleashed without restraint, and their effect has never been fully wiped from or cured by humanity in its current state. Thus is mutation rife across the worlds of the Imperium, across the stars. So this is why they occur, why they exist in such numbers. But why are mutants so feared? That is an even longer story. So again, we must only look at what is the very briefest of overviews. My apologies, for so many reasons are there. At this stage, I would like to draw a synthetic line in the types of mutants as well. Arbitrary, but it is required for brevity. I will now discuss mutants that are not psychic, are not able to wield the warp, and are just physically mutated. The reason for this is that if we delve too much into the psychics, or psykers as they are called by the Imperium and Grim Darkness in general, it would threaten to overtake the entire entry. So I will promise a full entry on psykers separately in the future. Just know that psykers are the most dangerous and feared of all forms of mutants. And it is in the fear of the psyker that we see the greater part, the most impelling reasons for the very logical fear of mutants. For to most of the Imperium, any mutant could be a psyker, and any psyker is definitely a mutant. So they are interchangeable in the group subconscious of the human race at this point. But let it be known, as we heard about in my story at the start, that psykers are able to wield power that is almost godlike, and they have the potential to be corrupted by the chaos gods, and just one falling can doom a world to its least and its last. Thus, all mutants are feared on this level. They truly are existential threats to all around them, and that is not hyperbole in the Warhammer 40k universe. But we digress somewhat. Why are all mutants feared and reviled as if they were all psykers, all lumped in together? Well, as discussed, much is to do with association, but not all of it. Some of it comes from the events of the early part of the Imperium, during and then after the Great Crusade of reconquest of the majority of the galaxy by the armies of the Emperor. For at this time, when the Primarchs strode the galaxy like demigods and were led by the master of mankind himself, things were very different. Things, even then, were more enlightened than they would become. Many worlds that were met by the forces and fleets of the Crusade were populated by mutants, deviations from the baseline of humanity. Some were abhumans like the Ogrins, Ratlins, Squats and Longshanks, etc., and even the now despised Beastmen. The distinction between mutant and abhuman was less important then. So when entire populations of mutants were found to be willing and sometimes enthusiastic peoples who wished to assist in the Great Crusade, they were indeed recruited into the armies of the Imperium and put to good use. Alas, when Horus Lupercal, the most trained and trusted, most beloved of the Emperor's Primarch generals, fell to evil, he was corrupted by the forces of chaos. He took the vast majority of the army and half of the legions of Space Marines and went into open rebellion against his father, the Emperor. Thus began the most horrific and costly of all the wars humanity had fought since the AI Rebellion. But it was oh so much worse, as it was human against human, brother killing brother. As mutants were a substantial part of the armies of evil, their mutations only got worse and more terrible as their service to the Chaos Gods continued. They left an indelible stain on the reputation and vision of all mutants from those days onwards. Mutation became linked to chaos worship, even more than it already was. So mutants not only had to contend with the typical and natural fear of other, of strangeness or deviance on an instinctive level, but there was also a very real reason to fear mutants. And fear and hate beget fear and hate. So it is that the Imperium has treated its mutant population as the very dregs of society, the untouchables, the silent and shunned mass that are good for work, but nothing more, if that at all. Many will state the life of most in the Imperium is a living hell, but it is a pampered, pleasurable existence of wealth and plenty compared to the lot of the mutant. Where they are not needed, they are culled. Where they are useful for manual labour in conditions no normal human would tolerate, even in the grim darkness, then they are allowed to exist. But only if they are compliant, only if they are voiceless, only if they are willing to cower at their master's whip. Alas, this creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. As they are treated like such an underclass, they have every reason to hate their masters, and to hate any they consider to support them. Hence they are often driven to rebel. Every rebellion then fuels the mistrust of the mutant population and perpetuates and accelerates the cycle of hate and pain. More worrying for the governors and officials of the Imperium is the fact that the mutant population is also seen as only one step from being corrupted from chaos, if not fully on the road. Hence when the rabble-rousers of the Alpha Legion, the dark apostles of the Word-Bearers, or any psycho or mutant of unnatural charisma enters their community, they have an ocean of untapped hate and resentment and rage to weaponize. So the link between chaos and mutants is even more solidified. And so the cycle goes on and gets worse with each and every year. The Imperium has even comparatively recently encoded a hierarchy of purity, one might say. To quote, the Godolkin Index. In the late 41st millennium, the official document outlining the differences between humans and mutants is the Godolkin Purebreed Guide, a treatise that describes the subject's deviation from the standard human phenotype according to a system of points. The more severe the mutation, the higher its value in points on the Godolkin Index. While on most Imperial worlds, a tolerance of up to 3 points is given, some worlds may be given exemptions by the Administratum due to their strategic value. For instance, on the industrial world of Kalidar, emergent mutants are only terminated if they deviate by more than 14 points from the baseline human genome. End quote. With this index in place, there can only be an intensification in the purges, pogroms, and final solutions concerning the huge mutant underclass extant in the Imperium. With the psychic awakening caused by the actions of Abaddon and his 13th Black Crusade, the tear across the galaxy that has led to the warp bleeding into real space across the length of the Imperium, the entire galaxy, there will only be more and more planets and entire populations that fall to mutation, if not even falling to chaos. And the most terrifying mutation, that of being a psyker, is far, far more likely than ever before. The full effects of the psychic awakening have yet to be explored, yet to be fully realized. But it has long been in the coming. In the very first book concerning Warhammer 40k, that grand old tome, penned over 3 decades ago that started it all, called Rogue Trader, it clearly stated that humanity was on the cusp of a transformation, an awakening. One that the Eldar feared more than anything else, as they saw their own doom being that of humanity as well. And with it comes anarchy and suffering, as psychers erupt into being across the galaxy. Thus it is that the plight of the human mutant on worlds of the Imperium are about to get a lot worse, as a response to the increased threat. A lot worse. Thus far, we have only discussed mutation as it applies to humanity inside the Imperium, which is often the way, as the most lore exists and most numerous factions are contained under this banner. It is also a known and irrefutable fact that of all the major races, humanity is the most vulnerable to mutation. This is often because of our susceptibility to the siren's call of chaos. None have so many that have fallen or been so corrupted as humanity. But let us quickly dip into the potential perspectives of other races that inhabit the Milky Way galaxy. The Tau. Unknown. It is not truly documented, to the best of my knowledge, how the Tau would deal with mutation within their own race, but they have had little expansion or the time to see environmental disruption change their race, as they are so young, nor have they engaged in civil wars that would lead to the chemical, biological or nuclear mutations rife within the Imperium and humanity. Prior to the present, I would have made a calculated guess that they would deal with any issue in what may presently be construed as a progressive and compassionate manner. But with the tear across the galaxy making their allies who are prone to psycho genes act more unpredictably, and with the experiences of the force sphere expansion, it cannot any longer be guaranteed that the Tau will not mimic the culls of the mutant population so prevalent in the Imperium, if they arise in the Tau race themselves. Only time will tell. Orcs, the greenskins. They generally kill anything viewed as un-orky. Chaos-tainted or mutated orcs would be crumped on sight. This may be construed as another built-in genetic programming, preventing them from being corrupted or evolved away from their present forms. They are a weapon forged by the old ones after all. But if I'm incorrect, then please, one of the old hands, do put this in the comments. Mutant Eldar. Eldar seem likely to expose or put down a mutant out of fear of chaos tainting, as the Eldar gene stock is very stable, but this may vary with Craftworld. But the Eldar are an old race, also weapons of the old ones, and have managed to stay largely without chaos corruption until the time of the Fall, only 10,000-ish years ago. This shows either astonishing genetic stability and resilience to the mutating effects of the warp, or is a clear indicant that they have always taken action to prevent mutation from sweeping through their population. The Tyranids, the bugs. Well, when it comes to the bugs, things are very simple. Anything not of a known pattern would either be reabsorbed or destroyed. I feel that mutants would be annihilated with extreme prejudice, much as insects destroy things that they are programmed to think may be a threat to their hive or nest. The Necrons. They cannot mutate. They are made of the living metal known as necrodermis. If they somehow mutate, they would be destroyed by their own forthwith. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed this brief sojourn into the background and the reality of the lives of mutants in the grim darkness of the future. If so, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then hit the bell button, as I would not want you to miss out. And rest assured, we will be dealing with the very complicated and horrifying truth of the reality of psychers very soon. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.